The cameras had been silent for weeks. Palace gates remained closed to the public eye, and royal watchers around the world held their breath, wondering when they would see their beloved queen again. Behind those ornate doors lay a story of quiet strength, personal struggle, and the kind of human resilience that transcends crowns and titles. When she finally stepped into the sunlight on that crisp spring morning, her radiant smile told a story that no official statement ever could. This is not just the tale of a monarch's return to public life. It's the deeply personal journey of a woman who faced her darkest hour and emerged with a light that seemed to shine brighter than ever before. The morning of March 8th began like any other at Buckingham Palace. Queen Elizabeth rose at her usual hour, reviewed her correspondence, and prepared for what would be her final public engagement for many weeks to come. The Children's Hospital charity event had been on her calendar for months, a cause particularly close to her heart since becoming patron 30 years earlier. Lady Margaret Thornfield, her private secretary, noticed nothing unusual as she briefed the Queen on the day's schedule. The monarch listened attentively, asked her customary thoughtful questions about the attendees, and even requested that extra time be allocated for meeting the young patients. It was this compassion, this genuine interest in the lives of others, that had endeared her to millions over her decades of service. The event itself went beautifully. Photographs from that day show the Queen in a vibrant blue coat, her eyes bright as she spoke with children recovering from serious illnesses. She spent nearly an hour longer than scheduled, personally visiting each ward and leaving behind small gifts she had carefully selected herself. The hospital staff would later describe it as one of her most memorable visits. Dr. Sarah Mitchell, the head pediatrician, recalled how the Queen had sat beside 7-year-old Tommy Patterson, who was battling leukemia. Rather than offering platitudes, she had engaged him in a serious conversation about his favorite books, listening intently as he explained the plot of his current adventure story. She promised to send him a signed copy of a book she thought he might enjoy, a promise she would keep even during the difficult weeks that followed. The drive back to the palace was quiet. The Queen gazed out the window at the London streets, observing the ordinary lives unfolding around her black Bentley. People hurried along sidewalks, carrying shopping bags and pushing prams, completely unaware that their monarch was passing by. These moments of anonymity in public had always provided her with a unique perspective on the world she served. Back at the palace, the Queen attended her usual afternoon briefing with Prime Minister Richardson. They discussed upcoming legislation, reviewed international correspondence, and planned for the state visit from the Danish royal family scheduled for late March. Everything seemed perfectly normal, perfectly routine. It was during dinner that evening that the first sign appeared. The Queen, known for her healthy appetite and love of simple, well-prepared meals, found herself pushing food around her plate. The roast beef, prepared exactly as she preferred it, seemed to have lost all appeal. She managed only a few bites before excusing herself, something that surprised her staff but didn't immediately alarm them. The following morning brought the first of what would become several canceled appointments. A meeting with the Archbishop of Canterbury was postponed, officially due to a minor scheduling conflict. Then came the cancellation of a garden party planning session, followed by the delay of a Commonwealth representative meeting. Each cancellation was explained with diplomatic language that revealed nothing of the truth. Lord Chamberlain Williams, one of the Queen's most trusted advisors, began to notice subtle changes in her routine. She was spending longer in her private study, sometimes remaining there well past her usual bedtime. Her beloved corgis, usually constant companions during her evening walks in the palace gardens, were increasingly left to the care of her staff. The Queen's personal physician, Dr. Elizabeth Hartwell, had been quietly monitoring a situation that had begun weeks earlier. What started as occasional fatigue had gradually developed into something more concerning. Blood tests revealed levels that required immediate attention, and Dr. Hartwell had been carefully managing the situation while respecting the Queen's desire for privacy. The decision to step back from public duties wasn't made lightly. The Queen had always believed in the importance of duty above personal comfort, a principle instilled in her from childhood and reinforced throughout her reign. She remembered her father's determination to continue his royal duties even when his health was failing, and she had always planned to follow his example. But Dr. Hartwell was insistent. The treatment required complete rest and minimal stress. Any compromise could potentially delay recovery or, worse, lead to more serious complications. The Queen listened to the medical advice with the same attention she gave to matters of state, asking detailed questions and seeking to understand every aspect of her condition. The conversation with her private secretary about clearing her calendar was one of the most difficult the Queen had ever had. Lady Margaret had served the royal family for 15 years and had never seen her employer struggle with such a decision. The Queen sat behind her mahogany desk, her hands folded precisely in her lap, and spoke with characteristic directness about the need for discretion. The palace's official statement was crafted with extraordinary care. It mentioned a minor health concern requiring rest and recovery, emphasizing that it was not serious, but required the Queen to temporarily reduce her public engagements. The statement was truthful without being specific, respectful of the monarch's privacy while addressing public concern. Media reaction was swift and intense. Royal correspondents who had covered the monarchy for decades began speculating about the nature of the Queen's condition. Television news programs featured medical experts discussing various possibilities, while newspapers dedicated front pages to analysis of the brief palace statement. The Queen watched some of this coverage from her private sitting room, surprised by the depth of public concern and touched by the genuine affection expressed by people from all walks of life. Flowers began arriving at palace gates within hours, accompanied by handwritten notes from citizens wishing their monarch a swift recovery. International reactions were equally warm. World leaders sent private messages of support, and foreign media covered the story with respect and sympathy. The Danish royal family, scheduled to visit later that month, immediately offered to postpone their trip, an offer the Queen initially declined before eventually accepting. As March progressed, the palace became quieter than usual. Staff continued their duties with professional efficiency, but there was an underlying tension that affected everyone from senior courtiers to kitchen staff. The Queen's absence from daily routines created a palpable void that reminded everyone of her central role in their lives. The Queen herself struggled with the forced inactivity. Accustomed to days filled with meetings, correspondence, and engagements, she found the quiet hours difficult to fill. She read voraciously, worked on a tapestry project she had started years earlier, and spent considerable time writing in her private journal, a practice she had maintained since childhood. Her family visited regularly, though these visits were kept strictly private. Her children took turns spending time with her, sharing family news, and helping to maintain her connection to the wider world. These conversations provided comfort and normalcy during a period when little felt normal. The Queen's bedroom was transformed into a comfortable recovery space, with her favorite books arranged within easy reach and fresh flowers changed daily. The large windows overlooked the palace gardens, where she could observe the changing season and the activities of her staff. This view became a source of both comfort and frustration as she watched life continue without her active participation. Dr. Hartwell visited daily, monitoring progress and adjusting treatment as needed. The physician had developed enormous respect for her patient's resilience and determination, qualities that she believed would be crucial to a successful recovery. The Queen approached her treatment with the same methodical attention she brought to matters of state, following medical advice precisely and tracking her own progress carefully. Letters and cards continued arriving from around the world. Palace staff, following the Queen's specific instructions, ensured that she saw a representative sample of this correspondence each day. Messages came from school children who had met her during royal visits, from veterans who remembered her wartime service, and from ordinary citizens whose lives had been touched by her presence in small but meaningful ways. One letter particularly moved the Queen. It came from Mrs. Eleanor Whitman, an elderly woman from Yorkshire who had met the Queen during a Diamond Jubilee celebration. Mrs. Whitman wrote about her own experience with illness and recovery, sharing wisdom gained through her own difficult journey. The letter's honesty and warmth prompted the Queen to write a personal response, one of the few pieces of correspondence she handled personally during this period. As March drew to a close, subtle improvements became apparent. The Queen's energy levels began to stabilize, and she showed increased interest in palace affairs. She resumed reading her daily government papers, though in smaller quantities than usual, and began asking more detailed questions about postponed engagements. The decision about when to return to public duties weighed heavily on everyone involved. Dr. Hartwell emphasized the importance of a gradual return, warning against the temptation to resume full activities too quickly. The Queen, eager to return to her duties, accepted this medical advice with patience that surprised even her closest staff. Planning for her return began quietly in late March. Lady Margaret worked with palace security and protocol officers to identify the most appropriate occasion for the Queen's first public appearance. The engagement needed to be meaningful but not overly demanding, significant but manageable. Throughout this period of recovery, the Queen reflected deeply on her role and responsibilities. The enforced isolation provided an unexpected opportunity for contemplation about her monarchy and its meaning to the people she served. She thought about the children at the hospital, about Mrs. Whitman's letter, and about the thousands of people who had taken time to express their concern for her well-being. These reflections led to a renewed appreciation for the human connections that formed the foundation of her role. The crown, she realized, derived its strength not from tradition or ceremony alone, but from the genuine relationships built through decades of service. This understanding would profoundly influence her approach to royal duties in the months that followed. The Queen also used this time to consider the future of the monarchy. Conversations with family members about succession and responsibility took on new urgency and depth. She discussed her hopes and concerns with characteristic honesty, sharing wisdom gained through decades of experience while acknowledging the challenges that lay ahead. By early April, the medical reports were encouraging. Dr. Hartwell felt confident that a carefully managed return to public duties could begin soon. The Queen had responded well to treatment, and her energy levels were approaching normal ranges. Most importantly, her enthusiasm for royal duties was clearly returning. The choice of her first public appearance became a matter of considerable discussion among palace advisors. Various options were considered and rejected before settling on an event that would allow for personal interaction while maintaining appropriate medical precautions. The Queen wanted her return to be meaningful, not merely ceremonial. Final preparations for her return began in mid-April. Wardrobe selections were made with particular care, choosing colors and styles that would convey vitality and joy. Speechwriters prepared remarks that would acknowledge the period of absence without dwelling on medical details. Security arrangements were reviewed and updated to ensure the Queen's safety and comfort. The Queen spent her final days of recovery in careful preparation, both physical and emotional. She practiced walking for extended periods, gradually building her stamina for the demands of public engagements. More importantly, she prepared mentally for the return to public scrutiny and the responsibilities that awaited her. As the date for her first public appearance approached, excitement began building among palace staff. The Queen's return would mark not just her personal recovery, but the restoration of normal palace operations. Everyone from senior advisors to junior staff felt the anticipation of this moment. The Queen herself experienced a complex mix of emotions as the day approached. She felt genuine excitement about returning to the work she loved, but also some anxiety about public reaction and her ability to meet the high expectations that always surrounded her appearances. These feelings were entirely natural, though she shared them only with her closest confidants. The night before her return, the Queen slept deeply and peacefully for the first time in weeks. She woke early, as was her custom, and spent considerable time in personal reflection and prayer. She thought about the journey that had brought her to this moment and expressed quiet gratitude for her recovery and for the support that had sustained her through the difficult weeks. The morning sun streamed through the tall windows of the Queen's private apartments as she began what would prove to be one of the most significant days of her reign. At 6:30, precisely as she had for decades, she rose and began her morning routine. But today felt different. Today marked the end of her longest absence from public life since her coronation. Her personal dresser, Mrs. Catherine Ashworth, had laid out a carefully selected ensemble the previous evening. The vibrant emerald coat, chosen specifically for its symbolic meaning of renewal and growth, hung beside a matching hat adorned with a subtle pearl brooch. The Queen examined each piece thoughtfully, understanding that every element of her appearance would be scrutinized and interpreted by media and public alike. The breakfast that morning was the first she had genuinely enjoyed in weeks. Cook had prepared her favorite simple meal: toast with honey from the palace hives, fresh fruit from the royal gardens, and Earl Grey tea served in her preferred china. As she ate, the Queen reviewed her speaking notes one final time, though she had practically memorized them during the previous evening's preparation. Dr. Hartwell arrived for a final check shortly after breakfast. The physician was pleased with what she observed: steady hands, clear eyes, and, most importantly, the return of the Queen's characteristic sense of purpose. The medical clearance was given with confidence, though Dr. Hartwell reminded her patient to pace herself carefully throughout the day. Lady Margaret appeared precisely at 9 o'clock with the final briefing materials. The Queen listened attentively as her secretary reviewed the guest list, timeline, and potential conversation topics. They had chosen this particular engagement, a visit to the renovated children's wing of St. Thomas's Hospital, because it combined the Queen's genuine passion for healthcare with manageable physical demands. The choice was deeply personal for the Queen. Children's hospitals had always held special significance in her royal duties, representing hope, resilience, and the future of the nation. During her weeks of recovery, she had often thought about the young patients she had met over the years, drawing inspiration from their courage in facing medical challenges far greater than her own. Preparation of the royal car began 2 hours before departure. Security teams conducted final route checks, while palace staff loaded the vehicle with gifts the Queen had personally selected during her recovery period. She had spent considerable time choosing books, toys, and small keepsakes that would bring joy to children facing serious illnesses. The Queen's hairdresser, Mr. Jonathan Mills, had worked carefully to create a style that would photograph while remaining comfortable for extended wear. The familiar set of her hair, combined with makeup that emphasized her natural coloring, created an appearance of vitality and wellness that accurately reflected her improved health. As 10:30 approached, the Queen made her way to the palace's primary entrance. Palace staff lined the corridors, offering respectful nods and warm smiles that reflected their genuine pleasure at her recovery. She paused to speak briefly with several long-serving employees, asking about their families and expressing appreciation for their dedication during her absence. The sight of the royal standard flying proudly above the palace brought unexpected emotion to the Queen's eyes. During her recovery, she had often gazed at that flag from her window, seeing it as a symbol of continuity and responsibility. Today, it represented her return to active service and the resumption of duties that had defined her adult life. Chief Inspector Williams, head of Royal Protection, provided a final security briefing as they approached the departure time. The route had been carefully planned to minimize disruption while ensuring maximum safety. Extra medical personnel would be discreetly positioned throughout the hospital, a precaution that the Queen accepted without complaint. The moment of stepping outside was profound in ways that surprised even the Queen herself. The fresh air felt different against her face, carrying scents of spring flowers from the palace gardens. She paused briefly on the steps, not for dramatic effect, but simply to appreciate the sensation of beginning this important journey back to public life. The gathered palace staff who witnessed her departure would later describe the transformation they observed in that moment. The queen, who had entered recovery 6 weeks earlier, seemed to have emerged with renewed energy and purpose. Her step was firm, her posture confident, and her expression radiated a sense of anticipation for the day ahead. The journey through London provided an unexpected preview of public reaction to her return. Word of her first public appearance had somehow leaked despite palace efforts to maintain discretion. Small crowds gathered at several intersections, waving enthusiastically as the royal car passed. The queen waved back with genuine warmth, touched by this spontaneous display of affection. During the 20-minute drive, the queen used the time for final mental preparation. She reviewed the names and conditions of specific patients she would be meeting, ensuring she could engage with each child personally. This attention to individual detail had always characterized her approach to royal duties and represented what she considered the most important aspect of her role. The hospital's chief executive, Dr. Patricia Morrison, had been preparing for this visit since receiving confirmation 2 days earlier. The entire facility buzzed with excitement and nervous energy. Staff had volunteered to work extra shifts just for the opportunity to be present during the royal visit. The children's ward had been decorated with cheerful banners and artwork created by young patients. As the royal car approached St. Thomas's Hospital, crowds of well-wishers had gathered behind carefully positioned barriers. News crews from major networks had positioned themselves to capture the Queen's arrival, while photographers jostled for the best angles. The scene represented controlled chaos managed by experienced security professionals. The Queen observed this gathering through her car window with mixed emotions. She felt deeply moved by the public turnout, understanding it as evidence of genuine concern for her well-being. At the same time, she experienced the familiar pressure of public scrutiny and the need to project strength and competence regardless of her internal feelings. Hospital security had worked closely with royal protection officers to ensure smooth entry to the facility. A covered walkway had been erected to provide privacy during the transition from car to building, allowing the Queen to compose herself fully before beginning her public interactions. Dr. Morrison waited at the hospital entrance with senior medical staff and representatives from the children's charity that had funded the new wing's renovation. The Queen had specifically requested that the group be kept small, preferring intimate conversations to large ceremonial gatherings during this first public appearance. As her car came to a stop, the Queen took a deep breath and offered a silent prayer of gratitude for her recovery and for the opportunity to return to service. The door was opened by Chief Inspector Williams, and she stepped out into the spring sunlight with a radiant smile that would be captured by dozens of cameras and remembered by all who witnessed it. The walk from the car to the hospital entrance took less than 30 seconds, but those moments crystallized everything the Queen had learned during her weeks of recovery. The enthusiastic applause from the gathered crowd, the respectful professionalism of the medical staff, and the excited faces of hospital workers watching from windows all reminded her why royal service remained meaningful in the modern world. Inside the hospital lobby, the Queen was greeted by a small group of senior staff and charity representatives. Dr. Morrison's welcome was warm, but appropriately brief, acknowledging both the significance of the visit and the Queen's need to pace herself carefully. The hospital's chief pediatrician, Dr. Amanda Foster, would serve as the primary guide for the visit to the children's ward. The renovated children's wing represented everything the Queen admired about modern healthcare. Bright, cheerful colors replaced the institutional green of previous decades. Play areas had been integrated throughout the ward, and family accommodations allowed parents to stay close to their children during treatment. The transformation had been made possible through charitable donations, many inspired by previous royal visits. As they made their way toward the lifts, the Queen encountered the first hospital workers of the day. A young nurse named Sarah Peterson was completing her shift after working through the night. She had delayed her departure specifically to see the Queen, and her excitement was barely contained as she offered a respectful curtsy. The Queen paused to thank her for her service, a gesture that brought tears to the young woman's eyes. The elevator ride to the children's ward provided a brief moment of privacy. Dr. Foster used the time to provide final details about the patients they would be meeting. Each child had been carefully selected for their ability to interact comfortably with visitors, though the Queen had insisted on meeting any child who expressed interest in seeing her. The doors opened to reveal a corridor transformed into a fairy tale setting. Young patients had worked with art therapists to create a mural depicting the Queen as a heroic character in various adventure stories. The artwork was both touching and impressive, representing weeks of collaborative effort by children dealing with serious medical challenges. 6-year-old Emma Richardson was the first patient to meet the Queen. Recovering from surgery to repair a congenital heart defect, Emma had spent considerable time preparing for this moment. She had practiced her curtsy with her mother and prepared a small drawing as a gift. The Queen knelt to Emma's eye level, accepting the artwork with genuine appreciation and engaging the little girl in conversation about her favorite subjects in school. The interaction with Emma established the tone for the entire visit. Rather than rushing through ceremonial pleasantries, the Queen invested genuine time and attention in each encounter. She listened carefully to children's stories, asked thoughtful questions about their interests and dreams, and offered encouragement that felt personal rather than perfunctory. 9-year-old Marcus Thompson was recovering from treatment for childhood leukemia. Despite his weakened condition, he had insisted on meeting the Queen, particularly because he had written a story about royal adventures during his long hospital stay. The Queen listened attentively as Marcus described his tale, offering suggestions and praise that demonstrated her genuine interest in his creative efforts. The hospital's play therapy coordinator, Miss Jennifer Walsh, had organized a special presentation in the ward's main recreation area. A small group of children who felt well enough to participate had prepared songs and simple performances to welcome the Queen. The informal concert created an atmosphere of celebration rather than solemnity, exactly what the Queen had hoped for during her return to public duties. 12-year-old Ashley Chun had been hospitalized for several weeks following a serious accident. Initially shy about meeting the Queen, she had gradually warmed to the idea after encouragement from staff and her parents. When the moment came, Ashley surprised everyone by presenting the Queen with a carefully written poem about courage and healing. The Queen was visibly moved by the young girl's words and promised to keep the poem among her treasured possessions. The visit to the hospital's family accommodation area provided insight into the comprehensive support the facility offered. Parents and siblings of young patients had access to comfortable spaces where they could rest, prepare meals, and maintain some semblance of normal family life during medical crises. The Queen spoke with several family members, listening to their experiences and offering words of encouragement. Mrs. Linda Hayes, whose 4-year-old son was recovering from complex surgery, described the difference the new family facilities had made during their month-long hospital stay. The Queen listened intently to Mrs. Hayes' account, understanding that effective healthcare required support for entire families, not just patients. This conversation reinforced her long-held belief in the importance of comprehensive healthcare systems. The hospital's staff break room provided an opportunity for the Queen to thank healthcare workers personally. Nurses, doctors, technicians, and support staff had gathered during their break times for this unexpected opportunity. The Queen moved through the room systematically, ensuring she spoke with representatives from every department and service. Staff nurse Michael Turner had worked at the hospital for 15 years and had met the Queen during previous visits. He was struck by the change in her demeanor during this visit, noting an increased warmth and engagement that seemed to reflect her recent experiences. The Queen asked detailed questions about his work and expressed particular interest in new treatment protocols that had improved outcomes for young patients. Dr. Foster guided the Queen through the ward's medical facilities, explaining how new equipment funded through charitable donations had enhanced treatment capabilities. The Queen demonstrated her characteristic attention to technical details, asking informed questions about medical procedures, and showing genuine interest in innovations that improved patient care. The visit to the hospital's research laboratory provided insight into ongoing efforts to develop new treatments for childhood diseases. Research coordinator Dr. Helen Price explained current projects studying genetic therapies and innovative surgical techniques. The Queen's questions demonstrated her understanding of medical research complexities and her appreciation for the dedication required to advance pediatric medicine. Laboratory technician James Wilson had prepared a special demonstration showing how genetic testing could predict treatment responses in young cancer patients. The Queen followed his explanation carefully, asking clarifying questions that impressed the research team with her grasp of complex scientific concepts. Her engagement reflected both her natural curiosity and her understanding of research's importance to future healthcare. As the formal tour concluded, the Queen requested a few minutes to speak privately with Dr. Morrison about the hospital's future needs and expansion plans. This conversation, conducted away from media attention, allowed for frank discussion about healthcare challenges and the role of charitable support in maintaining high-quality pediatric services. The Queen's departure from the children's ward was marked by genuine reluctance to leave. She had clearly enjoyed her interactions with patients, families, and staff, finding renewed energy in these meaningful connections. Several children had asked when she might visit again, a question she answered with careful honesty about the unpredictable nature of royal schedules. As they prepared to leave the hospital, Dr. Morrison presented the Queen with a specially prepared album containing photographs and messages from patients who had not been well enough to meet her personally. The gesture touched the Queen deeply, and she promised that she would read every message and treasure the photographs as reminders of her visit. The return journey through the hospital corridors provided opportunities for additional brief encounters with staff members who had not been included in the formal visit. The Queen made a point of acknowledging everyone she passed, understanding that these spontaneous interactions often meant as much to people as formal presentations. The final moments inside the hospital included the presentation of a donation to support ongoing research into childhood diseases. The Queen's personal contribution, made anonymously through royal charitable accounts, represented her commitment to supporting the work she had observed during the visit. Dr. Morrison accepted the donation on behalf of all patients and families who would benefit from continued research efforts. The transition from the hospital's protective environment to the public scrutiny outside marked a crucial moment in the Queen's return to royal duties. As she prepared to exit the building, Chief Inspector Williams provided a final briefing about the crowd that had gathered. What had begun as a small group of well-wishers had grown substantially throughout the morning, swelled by word of mouth and social media reports about the royal visit. Through the hospital's main windows, the Queen could observe the assembled crowd. Barriers held back hundreds of people, from families with young children to elderly couples who remembered her early reign. Many held flowers, handmade signs, and small Union Jack flags. Camera crews from international news organizations had joined the British media, reflecting global interest in her first public appearance since early March. Dr. Morrison accompanied the Queen toward the main entrance, expressing gratitude for the visit and its positive impact on both patients and staff. The hospital's chief executive had witnessed many royal visits over her career, but none had generated the level of emotional response she had observed today. Staff members continued to gather at windows and doorways, hoping for final glimpses of their distinguished visitor. The Queen paused just inside the main entrance, taking a moment to compose herself before stepping into the full glare of public attention. She understood that the next few minutes would be analyzed extensively by media commentators and royal watchers around the world. Every gesture, expression, and word would be scrutinized for signs of her health and well-being. Lady Margaret appeared at her side, offering final reminders about the timing and logistics of the departure. The Queen's private secretary had coordinated carefully with security personnel to ensure smooth movement through the crowd, while allowing for some spontaneous interaction with well-wishers. These unscripted moments often provided the most meaningful connections between the monarch and her people. As the hospital doors opened, the Queen stepped into brilliant spring sunshine that seemed to illuminate her radiant smile. The crowd's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. Cheers erupted from the gathered well-wishers, creating a wall of sound that reflected genuine joy at seeing their monarch return to public life. Many people wiped away tears as they witnessed this moment they had hoped for during the weeks of uncertainty. The Queen's response to this outpouring of affection was instinctive and heartfelt. Her smile broadened as she began the traditional royal walkabout, moving along the barriers to greet as many people as possible. Her step was confident, her posture erect, and her engagement with individuals was warm and personal. Any concerns about her stamina or health seemed immediately dispelled by her obvious enjoyment of these interactions. Mrs. Agnes Hartley, an 82-year-old pensioner from South London, had waited since dawn for this opportunity. When the Queen paused directly in front of her, Mrs. Hartley presented a small posy of daffodils from her garden, explaining that she had chosen the flowers because they represented new beginnings. The Queen accepted the gift graciously, engaging Mrs. Hartley in conversation about her garden and expressing genuine interest in her flower-growing techniques. 7-year-old Oliver Martinez had convinced his parents to bring him to see the Queen because he wanted to thank her personally for visiting sick children. When his moment came, Oliver presented a drawing he had made showing the Queen as a superhero helping children in hospitals. The Queen knelt to his level, examining the artwork carefully and praising his artistic skills. She promised Oliver that his drawing would have a place of honor in her private study. The international media contingent captured every moment of these interactions, transmitting images around the world that showed a monarch clearly restored to health and vitality. Royal correspondents who had covered her reign for decades noted the particular warmth and engagement she displayed, suggesting that her recent experience had deepened her connection to the people she served. Among the crowd was Mr. David Patterson, whose daughter had been treated at the hospital 5 years earlier. He had brought his now healthy 10-year-old to see the Queen, explaining to her that royal visits had provided hope during their family's darkest period. The Queen listened to their story with evident emotion, congratulating the family on their daughter's recovery and expressing pleasure at meeting such a brave young person. The walkabout continued for nearly 30 minutes, far longer than originally planned. The Queen seemed reluctant to conclude these interactions, finding energy and purpose in the direct connection with people whose lives have been touched by serious illness. Security personnel remained alert but relaxed, recognizing that their principal was genuinely enjoying herself and posed no risk to her own well-being through overexertion. Teenage student Emma Morrison had organized a group of her classmates to create a banner thanking the Queen for her service to children's charities. When the Queen paused to read their message, Emma nervously expressed her generation's appreciation for the monarch's dedication to causes that mattered to young people. The Queen's response emphasized the importance of youth engagement in charitable work and encouraged Emma and her friends to continue their community involvement. The presence of multiple generations in the crowd created touching scenes as grandparents lifted grandchildren for better views while sharing stories of previous royal encounters. Many elderly spectators had met the Queen during earlier decades of her reign, creating continuity between past and present that reinforced the monarchy's role as a unifying force in British society. Mrs. Priya Patel, whose son was currently receiving treatment at the hospital, had managed to leave his bedside briefly to thank the Queen personally. Through tears of gratitude, she explained how royal patronage had led to charitable donations that funded her son's experimental treatment. The Queen listened with compassion, offering words of encouragement and hope that reflected her deep understanding of what families face during medical crises. Local hospital worker Janet Stevens had completed a night shift but remained to see the Queen's departure. She had witnessed the positive impact of the royal visit on patients, families, and colleagues throughout the morning. When she had the opportunity to speak with the Queen, Janet expressed gratitude on behalf of all healthcare workers who felt supported and valued by royal attention to their profession. The Queen's interaction with news media during the walkabout was minimal but significant. She paused briefly to acknowledge veteran royal correspondent Sir Michael Crawford, who had covered her reign for over 30 years. Their exchange was brief but warm, reflecting mutual respect built over decades of professional interaction. She expressed appreciation for respectful media coverage during her period of recovery. As the walkabout neared its conclusion, the Queen encountered Margaret Thompson, a retired nurse who had worked in pediatric care for 40 years. Their conversation about changes in children's health care over the decades revealed the Queen's remarkable knowledge of medical developments and her genuine interest in professional experiences. Margaret later described the encounter as a career highlight that validated her life's work. The final moments of the public interaction featured the Queen accepting flowers from a group of young Girl Guides who had traveled from Surrey specifically for this opportunity. Their leader, Miss Caroline Roberts, had organized the trip as an educational experience about civic engagement and public service. The Queen spoke with each girl individually, asking about their community projects and encouraging their continued involvement. The accumulated emotional impact of these encounters was evident in the Queen's demeanor as she prepared to depart. Rather than appearing exhausted by the extended public interaction, she seemed energized and renewed. The genuine warmth of public response had clearly exceeded her expectations and provided confirmation of the deep affection people felt for their monarch. Security personnel began gently guiding the Queen toward her waiting car as the crowd continued calling out expressions of love and support. Many people shouted, "Welcome back," and "We missed you," creating a chorus of affection that was audible above the general crowd noise. The Queen paused frequently to wave and acknowledge these calls, clearly moved by their sincerity. The final image captured by photographers showed the Queen turning back toward the crowd one last time before entering her car. Her wave was confident, her smile radiant, and her entire bearing conveyed a sense of joy and renewal that would be analyzed and celebrated in news reports for days to come. This single gesture seemed to encapsulate her successful return to public life. Inside the royal car, the Queen allowed herself a moment of quiet reflection on what had just transpired. The overwhelming warmth of public response had exceeded all expectations and provided powerful validation of her decision to return to royal duties. The genuine affection expressed by people from all walks of life reminded her of why public service remained meaningful and fulfilling. Lady Margaret, seated beside her, began reviewing the afternoon schedule while providing initial feedback about the morning's success. Early reports from palace press officers indicated extremely positive media coverage, with particular emphasis on the Queen's obvious vitality and the warmth of her public interactions. International reaction was equally favorable, with world leaders and royal houses expressing pleasure at her successful return. The journey back to Buckingham Palace provided an opportunity to decompress from the intensity of public scrutiny while beginning to process the emotional impact of the morning's events. The Queen found herself thinking about individual conversations and encounters, each of which had reinforced her understanding of the monarchy's continuing relevance to people's lives. The car's route back to the palace had been adjusted to pass through several London neighborhoods, allowing for additional spontaneous encounters with well-wishers who had gathered along the streets. These impromptu moments of connection, captured through the car's windows, created additional opportunities for the Queen to acknowledge public support while maintaining appropriate security protocols. Upon arrival at Buckingham Palace, the Queen was greeted by senior household staff who had watched television coverage of her successful public return. Their obvious pleasure and relief reflected the anxiety that had permeated the royal household during her absence. Cook had prepared a special lunch featuring the Queen's favorite dishes, a small celebration of this important milestone in her recovery. The afternoon brought a stream of congratulatory messages from around the world. Commonwealth prime ministers, European monarchs, and international leaders sent official expressions of pleasure at seeing the Queen return to public duties. These diplomatic communications reflected both personal affection and recognition of her symbolic importance to global stability and continuity. Private family calls provided more intimate celebrations of the day's success. The Queen's children and grandchildren had watched television coverage with evident pride and relief. Their conversations with her reflected deep love and admiration for her courage in facing health challenges while maintaining dignity and grace under public scrutiny. The day's success was measured not only in positive media coverage, but in the tangible impact on all who had participated in or witnessed the events. Hospital staff reported improved morale and renewed sense of purpose following the royal visit. Patients who had met the Queen spoke with excitement about their encounters, finding inspiration for their own recovery journeys in her example of resilience. Dr. Hartwell's evening medical examination confirmed what everyone had observed throughout the day. The Queen showed no signs of fatigue or stress from her public activities. Indeed, her vital signs suggested that the positive emotional experience had been beneficial to her overall well-being. The physician felt confident that future public engagements could be planned with appropriate, gradually increased activity levels. The Queen spent her evening reviewing news coverage of the day's events, surprised by the global attention her return had generated. Television reports from around the world featured positive commentary about her obvious health and vitality. Social media responses were overwhelmingly supportive, with thousands of messages expressing joy at seeing her back in public life. As she prepared for bed that night, the Queen reflected on how much her perspective had changed during the weeks of recovery. The enforced pause in public duties had provided unexpected insights into what truly mattered in her role as monarch. The day's events had confirmed that authentic human connection, rather than ceremonial formality, formed the foundation of meaningful royal service. The success of her first public appearance created momentum for planning future engagements. Palace staff began reviewing postponed events and considering new opportunities that would allow the Queen to continue rebuilding her public schedule while respecting medical advice about gradual activity increases. The day had proven that her return to full royal duties was not only possible, but potentially more meaningful than ever before. The morning after the Queen's triumphant return brought a transformation that extended far beyond Buckingham Palace walls. Across the United Kingdom and throughout the Commonwealth, news of her successful public appearance had created waves of celebration and renewed confidence in the monarchy's stability. The images of her radiant smile and warm interactions with hospital patients and well-wishers have been broadcast globally, generating overwhelming positive response. At St. Thomas's Hospital, the impact was immediate and profound. Young patients who had met the Queen the previous day spoke excitedly about their encounters with families and friends. 6-year-old Emma Richardson, who had presented her drawing to the Queen, asked her mother repeatedly when she might see the royal visitor again. The little girl's spirits had lifted noticeably since the encounter, providing unexpected therapeutic benefits alongside her medical treatment. Ward staff reported remarkable changes in patient morale throughout the children's wing. Youngsters who had been withdrawn and discouraged before the royal visit displayed increased engagement with treatment and activities. Play therapists noted that many children wanted to create artwork depicting their memories of meeting the Queen, channeling their excitement into creative expression that aided their emotional healing. Dr. Amanda Foster, who had guided the Queen through the hospital visit, received dozens of messages from colleagues praising the positive impact on their young patients. The pediatrician realized that the Queen's presence had provided something no medical treatment could offer: hope and inspiration that transcended the clinical environment. Several parents reported that their children had slept better and eaten more enthusiastically since the royal encounter. The hospital's administration discovered that the royal visit had generated unprecedented interest in their charitable programs. Donation inquiries increased dramatically in the 24 hours following the Queen's appearance, with many potential supporters specifically mentioning her obvious dedication to children's health care as motivation for their giving. Development Officer Sarah Collins found herself overwhelmed with calls from individuals and organizations wanting to contribute to pediatric services. Beyond the immediate hospital environment, the Queen's successful return resonated throughout the healthcare community. Medical professionals across the country expressed renewed appreciation for royal support of their work. The Queen's evident understanding of medical complexities and genuine engagement with healthcare workers had reinforced the value of royal patronage in promoting public health initiatives. At Buckingham Palace, the atmosphere had shifted dramatically from the subdued tone that had characterized the previous 6 weeks. Staff members moved with renewed energy and purpose as they began planning the Queen's gradual return to a full schedule of public engagements. The successful hospital visit had proven that their monarch was not only recovered, but possibly more effective in her role than ever before. Lady Margaret Thornfield found herself inundated with requests for royal appearances from organizations that had learned of the Queen's return through media coverage. Charitable organizations, educational institutions, and community groups across the Commonwealth submitted formal invitations, hoping to benefit from the obvious positive impact of royal attention. The challenge would be managing these requests while respecting medical advice about gradual activity increases. Press Secretary Richard Hamilton dealt with unprecedented international media interest in the Queen's recovery story. News organizations from around the world requested interviews and background information about her health journey and return to public duties. The challenge was providing sufficient information to satisfy legitimate public interest while maintaining appropriate privacy about personal medical matters. The Queen's successful public appearance had also generated significant political benefits. Prime Minister Richardson's office reported improved public confidence in governmental stability, with polling numbers showing increased satisfaction with national leadership. The monarchy's visible strength and continuity provided reassurance during a period of international uncertainty and domestic challenges. Commonwealth leaders expressed particular relief at seeing their ceremonial head of state return to full health and activity. High commissioners and governors general from member nations sent formal congratulations while privately acknowledging the stabilizing influence of royal presence during challenging economic and social periods in their respective countries. The Queen herself spent the morning reviewing an enormous volume of correspondence that had arrived overnight. Messages came from ordinary citizens, world leaders, fellow monarchs, and organizations representing millions of people worldwide. The consistent themes were joy at her recovery, admiration for her resilience, and appreciation for her dedication to public service. One letter particularly moved the Queen. It came from Mrs. Dorothy Jenkins, a 90-year-old woman from Wales who had written to express gratitude for the monarch's courage in facing health challenges publicly. Mrs. Jenkins shared her own experience with serious illness at advanced age, describing how news of the Queen's recovery had provided inspiration for her own healing journey. The letter reminded the Queen that her example could influence far more people than those she met personally. Dr. Hartwell's morning examination confirmed the previous day's positive assessment. The Queen showed no adverse effect from her public activities and, indeed, seemed energized by the experience. The physician felt confident in recommending a carefully planned expansion of royal duties, with appropriate medical monitoring and gradual increases in activity levels. The international reaction to the Queen's return continued building throughout the day. European royal houses sent formal messages of congratulation, with many monarchs sharing their own experiences of health challenges and public duties. These private communications revealed the unique pressures faced by those in hereditary leadership roles and the mutual support they provided each other during difficult periods. Major newspapers across the globe featured the Queen's return as front-page news. Editorial commentaries praised her dignity in handling health challenges and her obvious dedication to royal duties. Many publications noted the contrast between her graceful approach to personal difficulties and the often chaotic political leadership visible in democratic nations worldwide. Television news programs dedicated significant time to analyzing the psychological and political implications of the Queen's successful return. Royal experts and constitutional scholars discuss the stabilizing effect of monarchical continuity during periods of rapid social and economic change. The Queen's visible health and energy were interpreted as positive indicators for institutional stability. Social media platforms experienced unprecedented engagement with content related to the royal visit. Photographs and videos from the hospital appearance were shared millions of times, accompanied by overwhelmingly positive commentary from users around the world. Hashtags celebrating the Queen's return trended globally, creating organic campaigns of support that demonstrated genuine public affection. The economic impact of renewed royal activity became apparent through increased tourist interest in royal sites and ceremonies. Tourism boards across the United Kingdom reported surges in inquiries about visiting palaces, royal attractions, and locations associated with the monarchy. The Queen's visible return to public life had inadvertently created valuable promotional benefits for the tourism industry. Museum directors and heritage site managers noted increased visitor interest in royal collections and historical displays. The Queen's successful return seemed to have reinvigorated public interest in monarchical history and traditions. Educational institutions reported growing enrollment in courses related to constitutional history and ceremonial protocols. Within the royal household, planning began for carefully managed increases in the Queen's public schedule. Palace advisors worked with medical consultants to develop protocols that would allow for meaningful royal engagements while protecting the monarch's health and energy. The success of the hospital visit provided a template for future appearances that balanced public access with appropriate personal limitations. The Queen's private conversations with family members revealed her own surprise at the overwhelming public response to her return. She had expected polite interest, but had not anticipated the depth of genuine affection and concern expressed by people from all walks of life. These reactions reinforced her understanding of the monarchy's emotional significance to millions of people worldwide. Charitable organizations that had benefited from royal patronage reported immediate increases in public attention and support following the Queen's successful return. The visibility of her genuine engagement with healthcare causes had reminded potential donors of the practical impact of royal involvement in philanthropic activities. Development officers found themselves fielding inquiries from major donors who wanted to support causes associated with royal patronage. The success of the hospital visit also influenced planning for upcoming state visits and ceremonial occasions. Foreign ministries of nations scheduled to receive royal visits expressed increased confidence in the value of these diplomatic exchanges. The Queen's obvious vitality and engagement suggested that future international appearances would be particularly effective in strengthening bilateral relationships. Religious leaders across the Commonwealth expressed gratitude for the Queen's example of grace under pressure and resilience in the face of health challenges. Many incorporated references to her recovery into sermons and public statements, using her experience as an illustration of faith, courage, and service to others. The Archbishop of Canterbury issued a formal statement praising her dedication to duty and her inspirational example during difficult circumstances. Educational institutions that had postponed royal visits during the Queen's recovery began requesting new dates for appearances. University chancellors and school administrators recognized that royal attention could provide significant benefits to their institutions while offering students memorable experiences that reinforce civic values and service ideals. The day's developments also influenced financial markets, with companies associated with royal warrants and royal suppliers experiencing increased investor interest. The Queen's successful return suggested continued stability for businesses that depended on royal patronage and ceremonial contracts. Tourism-related stocks showed particular strength as investors anticipated increased visitor interest in royal attractions. International diplomatic circles noted the positive implications of the Queen's recovery for Commonwealth relations and British soft power globally. Embassy staff reported increased interest from foreign governments in arranging meetings and cultural exchanges. The monarch's visible strength and engagement provided valuable support for British diplomatic initiatives worldwide. As evening approached, the Queen reflected on the remarkable response her return had generated. She had undertaken the hospital visit primarily as a personal milestone in her recovery, but it had clearly evolved into something much larger. The overwhelming public reaction had reminded her of the monarchy's unique role in providing stability, continuity, and inspiration during uncertain times. The success of her first public appearance also raised important questions about the future pace and nature of her royal duties. The positive response from patients, healthcare workers, and the general public suggested that her approach to royal service might be evolving in ways that emphasized authentic human connection over ceremonial formality. Dr. Foster at St. Thomas's Hospital spent her evening reviewing the lasting impact of the royal visit on her patients and staff. The enthusiasm and hope generated by the Queen's presence had created measurable improvements in patient outcomes and staff morale. The pediatrician began developing protocols for sustaining these positive effects through ongoing programs inspired by the royal visit. The Queen's evening concluded with private telephone conversations with Commonwealth prime ministers who had watched coverage of her successful return. These leaders expressed both personal pleasure at her recovery and professional appreciation for the stabilizing influence of her visible health and engagement. The conversations reinforced her understanding of the monarchy's continuing relevance to global democratic institutions. As she prepared for sleep, the Queen reviewed the day's correspondence one final time, focusing particularly on messages from young people who had been inspired by her example of courage and service. These communications reminded her that royal duty extended far beyond ceremonial appearances to include modeling values and behaviors that could influence future generations. The day had proven that her return to public life was not merely about resuming previous activities, but about embracing new opportunities to serve with deeper understanding and enhanced appreciation for the human connections that gave meaning to royal duty. The success of her first public appearance had exceeded all expectations and created momentum for a renewed approach to monarchical service. 3 weeks had passed since the Queen's triumphant return to public life, and the transformation in both her personal approach and public perception had become unmistakably profound. The hospital visit that had marked her comeback was now recognized as a pivotal moment that had redefined not only her own understanding of royal service, but also the public's relationship with the monarchy itself. The Queen's morning routine had evolved during these weeks to incorporate lessons learned from her period of recovery and subsequent return. She continued rising at her customary early hour, but now began each day with a period of personal reflection that had become central to her renewed approach to royal duties. This quiet time allowed her to consider not just the day's schedule, but the deeper purpose behind each engagement. Lady Margaret Thornfield had noticed significant changes in how the Queen approached her correspondence and official duties. Where previously she had processed matters with efficient formality, she now brought a more personal perspective to her work. Letters from citizens received more thoughtful responses, and official meetings were characterized by deeper engagement and more meaningful questioning. The physical evidence of the Queen's successful return filled her private study. Photographs from the hospital visit occupied places of honor alongside traditional royal portraits, while drawings and letters from young patients were displayed prominently on her desk. These reminders of authentic human connection had become touchstones for her evolving understanding of monarchical purpose. Dr. Hartwell's weekly medical examinations continued to show remarkable improvements not just in the Queen's physical condition, but in her overall well-being. The physician noted that her patient seemed more energetic and purposeful than she had been even before her health challenges. The experience of recovery and return appeared to have enhanced rather than diminished her capacity for royal service. The ripple effects of the Queen's successful comeback continued expanding throughout British society and the wider Commonwealth. Hospitals across the nation reported increased volunteer applications from people inspired by the royal visit to St. Thomas's. Medical schools noted growing interest in pediatric specialties as young students drew inspiration from the Queen's obvious dedication to children's health care. The broader healthcare community had embraced the Queen as a particularly effective advocate for their profession. Medical associations invited her to serve as patron for new research initiatives, while nursing organizations sought her support for campaigns promoting professional recognition and improved working conditions. Her genuine understanding of medical complexities, demonstrated during the hospital visit, had elevated her credibility within healthcare circles. International recognition of the Queen's resilience and grace during her health challenges led to numerous requests for her involvement in global health initiatives. The World Health Organization formally invited her to serve as a special ambassador for children's health programs, while UNICEF sought her patronage for campaigns addressing medical care in developing nations. These opportunities reflected growing recognition of her unique ability to inspire confidence and support for healthcare causes. The Queen's evolving approach to royal duties had also influenced younger members of the royal family. Her grandchildren, observing her renewed engagement and authentic connections with people from all walks of life, began adopting similar approaches in their own public activities. The next generation of royals increasingly emphasized meaningful interaction over ceremonial obligation, following the example set by their grandmother's transformation. Palace staff had adapted their procedures to accommodate the Queen's new priorities. Where previous protocols emphasized efficiency and formal propriety, current practices allowed more time for spontaneous interactions and deeper engagement with visitors. Security arrangements were modified to permit closer contact with the public while maintaining appropriate safety measures. The Queen's calendar had gradually expanded to include a carefully curated selection of engagements that reflected her renewed priorities. Rather than simply resuming her previous schedule, she chose appearances that emphasized direct service to causes she found meaningful. Each engagement was planned to maximize opportunities for authentic connection while respecting medical guidance about appropriate activity levels. A visit to a veterans rehabilitation center demonstrated the evolution in her approach to royal duties. Instead of the traditional brief tour and formal presentation, the Queen spent extended time with individual patients, listening to their stories, and engaging in detailed conversations about their recovery journeys. Her own experience with health challenges had created a natural empathy that enhanced her ability to provide meaningful support and encouragement. The transformation was equally evident during a subsequent visit to a primary school in an economically disadvantaged area of London. Rather than observing classroom activities from a respectful distance, the Queen participated actively in lessons, reading with children, and discussing their aspirations and challenges. Teachers reported that her genuine interest had motivated students to engage more enthusiastically with their education. These authentic interactions generated increasingly positive media coverage that focused on substance rather than ceremony. Royal correspondents noted the obvious pleasure the Queen derived from meaningful engagement with real people facing genuine challenges. Public opinion polling showed dramatic increases in support for the monarchy, with citizens expressing particular appreciation for the Queen's accessibility and genuine concern for their welfare. The Queen's approach to international relations had also evolved following her health challenges and successful recovery. Diplomatic receptions now featured more substantive conversations about global issues, while state visits incorporated opportunities for engagement with ordinary citizens of visiting nations. Foreign leaders commented on her increased warmth and apparent genuine interest in their country's domestic challenges. Commonwealth Prime Ministers reported similar observations during their regular meetings with the Queen. Her questions have become more probing, and her interest in their nation's social and economic challenges more evident. Several leaders privately noted that her recent experiences seemed to have deepened her understanding of leadership during difficult circumstances. The Queen's private reflections during this period, recorded in her personal journal, revealed the profound impact of her health challenges and recovery on her understanding of royal purpose. She wrote extensively about the responsibility she felt to model resilience and hope for people facing their own difficulties. The overwhelming public response to her return had reinforced her commitment to serving as an inspiration for courage and perseverance. Family conversations have become more open and meaningful as the Queen shared insights gained during her period of recovery. Her children and grandchildren reported deeper discussions about royal duty, personal fulfillment, and the balance between private life and public service. These conversations influenced their own approaches to royal responsibilities and strengthened family bonds that had always been important to the Queen. The long-term impact of the Queen's transformation extended beyond immediate royal duties to influence broader cultural attitudes toward aging, health challenges, and public service. Her example of grace under pressure and successful recovery had become a source of inspiration for older adults facing their own health concerns. Support groups for various medical conditions adopted her story as evidence that significant challenges could be overcome with appropriate medical care and personal determination. Educational institutions began incorporating the Queen's recovery story into curricula about resilience, leadership, and public service. Business schools analyzed her approach to crisis management and communication during health challenges, while medical schools used her case as an example of successful collaboration between patients and healthcare providers. The charitable sector experienced unprecedented growth in donations and volunteer participation, with many contributors specifically citing the Queen's example as motivation for their increased giving. Organizations focused on children's health, medical research, and support for families facing health crises reported dramatic increases in both financial support and volunteer engagement. The Queen's renewed approach to royal duties had also influenced government policy regarding healthcare and social services. Politicians across party lines reference her example when advocating for improved support for families dealing with medical challenges. Her visible engagement with healthcare workers had elevated public appreciation for medical professionals and influenced policy discussions about working conditions and compensation. International observers noted the broader implications of the Queen's successful navigation of health challenges and return to public life. Constitutional scholars studied her example as a model for how hereditary leaders could maintain legitimacy and relevance during personal difficulties. Other monarchies adopted similar approaches to communication during health crises, recognizing the effectiveness of her balanced approach to privacy and public reassurance. The transformation in the Queen's public image had significant implications for the future of the monarchy. Younger generations who had previously viewed royal institutions as outdated and irrelevant began expressing increased respect for her authentic approach to public service. Social media engagement with royal content reached new heights, with particularly positive responses to posts featuring her interactions with ordinary citizens. Media coverage of royal activities shifted focus from ceremonial pageantry to substantive engagement with social issues. Journalists began highlighting the practical impact of royal patronage and the genuine difference royal attention made to charitable organizations and community initiatives. This evolution in coverage contributed to improved public understanding of the monarchy's continuing relevance. The Queen's personal satisfaction with her evolved approach to royal duty was evident in her increased energy and enthusiasm for public engagements. Staff members noted her obvious pleasure in meaningful interactions and her reluctance to conclude visits when she was genuinely enjoying conversations with citizens. This renewed passion for royal service had positive effects on everyone around her. As spring progressed into summer, the Queen's calendar expanded to include an increasingly diverse range of engagements that reflected her broadened understanding of royal purpose. From visiting community gardens to attending medical research conferences, her activities emphasized real-world impact over traditional ceremony. The success of her transformation influenced planning for major ceremonial occasions, with organizers incorporating more opportunities for public interaction and authentic engagement. Traditional formal protocols were modified to allow for spontaneous moments and genuine connections while maintaining appropriate dignity and respect. The Queen's correspondence during this period revealed her deep appreciation for the journey that had brought her to this new understanding of royal service. Letters to trusted friends and advisors expressed gratitude for the support that had sustained her during challenging weeks and excitement about opportunities to serve more meaningfully in the years ahead. Dr. Hartwell's final assessment of the Queen's recovery concluded that the health challenges, while initially concerning, had ultimately contributed to improved overall well-being through the personal growth and renewed sense of purpose they had generated. The physician noted that her patient approached life with increased vitality and optimism that had measurable positive effects on her physical health. The children from St. Thomas's Hospital who had met the Queen during her comeback visit continued correspondence with the palace throughout the following months. Their letters, filled with updates about their recovery progress and expressions of gratitude for her inspiration, provided ongoing validation of the meaningful impact authentic royal engagement could achieve. As the first anniversary of her health challenges approached, the Queen reflected on the unexpected gifts that had emerged from what had initially seemed like a setback. The enforced pause in public activities had provided opportunities for reflection and growth that had ultimately enhanced her capacity for service. Her successful return had demonstrated that authentic leadership could emerge stronger from periods of vulnerability. The lasting legacy of the Queen's transformation extended far beyond her personal recovery to influence fundamental perceptions about leadership, service, and the capacity for growth throughout life. Her example had proven that even the most established institutions could evolve and adapt while maintaining their essential character and purpose. The Queen's story had become a powerful reminder that true strength often emerged from facing challenges with courage and grace, that authentic leadership required genuine connection with those being served, and that the most profound transformations could occur at any stage of life. Her radiant joy during that first public appearance had indeed marked not just a return to duty, but the beginning of a remarkable new chapter in a life dedicated to service.